Summary and analysis by Brevreds. Introduction. Who is Gary Vaynerchuk? Before diving into what Gary Vaynerchuk teaches, let's get to know him. Gary V, as many know him, is a Belarusian-American entrepreneur who has turned his name into a brand synonymous with hustle, marketing savvy, and mastering social media. He's the guy who took his family's wine business from a local liquor store to a $60 million e-commerce juggernaut through innovative online marketing. Now, he runs a multi-million-dollar digital media agency, Vaynermedia, and is a best-selling author, speaker, and venture capitalist. His story? It's all about hustle, persistence, and smart use of technology. From working in his family's wine store as a kid, to being one of the most outspoken voices on how the internet can change your life. Gary's journey shows what happens when you combine traditional work ethic with modern-day tools. And that's where his teachings come in. Gary's advice? It's not about some overnight success formula. He believes in putting in the time, staying patient, and using the internet and social media to tell your story. He's obsessed with self-awareness, and his ideas are more about playing the long game than making a quick buck. His books and talks revolve around practical tips to build a life and business you love, whether you're starting out with nothing or already have something going. Now, let's break down what you can learn from Gary V, starting with some of his most well-known ideas. Chapter 1. Crush It. Building a personal brand in a social media world. Gary V's breakthrough book, Crush It, introduced the idea that anyone with a passion can build a personal brand and monetize it through social media. He didn't come from the celebrity world or a rich background. He built his platform through content creation, especially by using the power of YouTube, Twitter, and later Instagram. What's the big takeaway here? If you have the internet, you have a voice. And that voice, if used the right way, can turn your passion into profit. It all starts with something you love doing. Are you obsessed with basketball? Do you have a weird hobby like collecting vintage sneakers? Maybe you have a love for cooking or makeup? Whatever it is, Gary believes you can build a business around it. The first step is putting yourself out there consistently. Gary didn't blow up overnight. Back in the early 2000s, he began a little thing called Wine Library TV, a daily video series on YouTube where he reviewed wines and educated people about them. Most people didn't know that he wasn't even that into wine. He grew up working at his parents' wine shop, so it was what he knew. What he really loved was business, and he used his wine knowledge to build a massive following online. It wasn't glamorous at first. He was doing everything himself, recording, editing, uploading. And it took years of this grind before anyone noticed. This is where Gary's philosophy shines. You don't need to wait for someone else's permission to start creating. He didn't have fancy production, nor did he have connections in the industry. He just showed up, day after day, and did the work. His secret weapon? Consistency. In today's world, it's not enough to post one great video or write one blog post. You've got to show up regularly, engage with your audience, and evolve as you go. Important tip: you might feel weird putting yourself out there. You might think, who cares about my opinion? But remember, Gary was a kid from Belarus talking about wine in his parents' shop. What makes you unique is that no one else can deliver your message the way you do. Even if your niche seems crowded, your personality and voice will attract the right people over time. Gary talks about a moment early on when he was reading every email, responding to every tweet, and basically doing customer service for his own content. He still believes in this approach today. That level of care and hustle sets you apart. People appreciate being noticed. And when you treat your audience like gold, they become loyal followers. Lesson from Chapter 1. Pick something you're passionate about. Start creating content around it. Don't wait for perfection. Engage with your audience like crazy. Even if it feels like no one's watching, keep going because someone out there will eventually see your work, and when they do, you want them to find a body of content that shows your expertise and dedication. Chapter 2. Social media is your gateway to success. Gary's been called one of the pioneers of social media marketing because he saw its potential early on. Most people treated platforms like Twitter and Facebook as just for fun. Gary saw them as tools to change the game. His big insight? Social media lets you build relationships at scale. Imagine this: back in the day, if you wanted to grow a business, you had to buy ads in magazines, print flyers, or rely on word of mouth. Social media makes it possible for you to reach hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people without spending a dime. But there's a catch: you've got to be real, and you've got to give more than you take. Gary is known for his concept of jab, 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 right hook. What does that mean? It's simple. Jabs are the value you give: free content, advice, tips. Right hooks are when you ask for something like selling a product or promoting a service. You can't go for the sell right away. You have to build trust first by giving. Gary tells a story about how he used Twitter back in the early days. He would search for people who were asking questions about wine and answer them for free without promoting anything. Someone would tweet, "I'm having steak tonight. What wine should I drink?" And there was Gary, popping into their feed with a helpful suggestion. No sales pitch. No links to buy something. Just pure, helpful advice. Over time, this made him the go-to wine guy for thousands of people. That's how you win on social media. You give value, interact with people, and build real relationships. People want to do business with those they trust, and the only way to build that trust is through authenticity and providing consistent value. Important tip: don't treat social media as just a place to blast out your promotions. Think of it as a networking event where you're shaking hands, making friends, and slowly building relationships. If you only ever ask people for something, they'll tune you out. But if you give, whether that's entertainment, advice, or information, people will start to pay attention and come back for more. One of Gary's favorite platforms is Instagram, but he stresses that it's all about where your audience is. Maybe TikTok is your thing, or maybe you're a whiz on LinkedIn. The key is to be where your people are and speak their language. Lesson from chapter: use social media as a way to connect with people by giving, not asking. Build trust by sharing value, whether that's tips, stories, or entertainment, and save your right hook, the ask, for when you've established that connection. Chapter 3: Patience and Hustle. Here's one of Gary's biggest ideas, and it's probably not what you want to hear. Patience is key. In a world that's obsessed with overnight success stories, Gary is here to remind you that real success takes time. Years, sometimes decades. But the good news is, if you put in the work every day, you'll eventually get there. Gary's story isn't one of instant success. He spent years grinding in his family's liquor store, learning the business and trying new ideas. He didn't start Vaynermedia or become a well-known figure until after years of laying the groundwork. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. Hustle is about doing the work when no one's watching. It's staying up late to edit your videos, waking up early to work on your blog, and showing up day after day, even when you feel like giving up. It's being willing to work harder than the next person, even if that means sacrificing short-term comfort for long-term gain. There's a great story about how Gary gave a keynote at a huge conference, and afterwards, instead of rushing off to the next meeting, he stayed behind and signed autographs, took pictures, and answered questions from attendees for hours. Why? Because that's what hustle looks like. It's going the extra mile when others would call it a day. But hustle alone isn't enough. You have to combine it with patience. Gary often says that people expect too much too soon. They start a YouTube channel, and after 2 months, they're frustrated they don't have 1 million followers. The truth is, the people who win are the ones who stick with it long after others have quit. Important tip: think long-term. Don't get discouraged if you're not seeing immediate results. Most overnight success stories have years of hard work behind them. Keep showing up, keep creating, and keep improving. Chapter 4: Self-Awareness, the Ultimate Superpower. One of Gary's most important teachings, and one that's often overlooked, is self-awareness. To him, this is the ultimate key to success, and it's something that isn't talked about enough in business and life. Self-awareness is about knowing who you are, what you're good at, and just as importantly, what you're not good at. It means being honest with yourself about your strengths and weaknesses, and then making decisions based on that understanding. Gary has no patience for people who waste time trying to be something they're not. Want to be an entrepreneur? Great, but first ask yourself, are you wired to be one? Some people are natural-born entrepreneurs. They love risk, thrive under pressure, and are willing to sacrifice stability for a shot at building something big. Others, however, might not have that mindset, and that's okay. Maybe you're a better operator than a leader. Maybe you're more of a creative type. The key is to figure that out as early as possible and lean into what makes you unique. Gary often shares a story from his early career, When he was working in his family's wine business, he realized he wasn't a fan of the wine itself. He didn't care about the tasting notes or the prestige of expensive bottles. But he was obsessed with selling wine and building a business. This self-awareness allowed him to focus on what he was good at, marketing and growing a brand, rather than trying to become an expert sommelier. It's this honesty with himself that made all the difference. It's easy to get caught up in what society or social media says you should be doing. Maybe all your friends are talking about getting into tech, or you see influencers making millions from dropshipping and you feel the pull to follow that path. But if that's not your strength, you're wasting your time. Gary says it's far more effective to double down on your strengths than to fixate on your weaknesses. Why spend years trying to improve something you'll only ever be average at when you could focus on what makes you exceptional? Important tip: sit down and take an honest look at yourself. What are you naturally good at? What comes easily to you that others struggle with? Maybe you're great at managing people, or maybe you're amazing at coming up with creative ideas. Whatever it is, identify that strength and lean into it. Don't waste energy trying to fit into someone else's idea of success. Chapter 5. Stop overthinking. Execution is everything. A common theme in Gary V's advice is that execution beats ideas every time. Too many people are paralyzed by overthinking. They have great ideas but never take action because they're afraid of failing, or they're waiting for the perfect moment. Gary's message is clear: there is no perfect moment. You just have to start. It doesn't matter how brilliant your idea is if you never act on it. In Gary's world, there's nothing worse than being all talk and no action. He believes in speed and urgency. If you have an idea, try it. If it doesn't work, learn from it, adjust, and move on. The biggest mistake is doing nothing because you're afraid of failing. Gary loves to tell the story of his first website for Wine Library. It wasn't a slick, well-designed masterpiece. It was basic. In fact, he says it looked terrible. But guess what? It worked. He didn't wait around for it to be perfect before launching. He got it up and running, and then he improved it as he went along. If he had waited for the ideal design or perfect functionality, he might have missed the opportunity to get ahead of his competitors in the early days of e-commerce. This idea of taking action extends to social media content too. One of Gary's biggest pieces of advice is to just start creating, even if it's not perfect. He believes that quantity often trumps quality when it comes to building a presence online. You don't need every post to be a masterpiece. What matters is that you're consistently putting yourself out there, trying new things, and learning as you go. Remember, even if your first efforts don't go viral, you're building muscle. You're developing the skills, confidence, and work ethic that will pay off over time. Too many people overthink content creation, trying to make each post or video perfect, and as a result, they barely post at all. Don't let that be you. Important tip: take action, even if it's messy. Stop waiting for the perfect idea or perfect time. Execution is everything, and you'll learn more from doing than from thinking about doing. Chapter 6. The importance of gratitude and perspective. Hustle is essential, but there's another side to Gary's teachings that doesn't always get as much attention: gratitude and perspective. While Gary is all about putting in the work, he also emphasizes the importance of staying grounded and appreciating what you have. He often says that one of the things that drives him most is the realization that we're incredibly lucky to even be alive, living in a time where the internet allows us to build whatever we want. Think about it. Not that long ago, if you wanted to start a business, you needed a huge amount of capital, connections, and resources. Today, you can literally start a company from your phone. That's an unbelievable opportunity, and Gary believes it's something we should all be grateful for. Gary often references his family's immigrant story to underscore this point. His parents came to the US from Belarus with almost nothing. They worked hard, saved every penny, and eventually opened a small business. Gary's early experience growing up in this environment gave him a deep appreciation for what it takes to build something from scratch, and it's why he never takes success for granted. Whenever people ask Gary how he stays motivated despite already achieving so much, his answer is simple: gratitude. He reminds himself every day how lucky he is to be in a position to do what he loves. This perspective helps him stay grounded and keeps him from getting caught up in the negative side of social media or business challenges. And here's something important: gratitude doesn't mean being complacent. It doesn't mean you should stop striving for more. Instead, it's about balancing your ambition with a sense of appreciation for what you have right now. Gary believes that when you start from a place of gratitude, it changes how you approach everything else. You become more patient, more empathetic, and more resilient when things don't go your way. Important tip: practice gratitude every day. Whether it's for the people in your life, the opportunities you have, or just the fact that you're alive and able to pursue your passions, remind yourself of the bigger picture. This will give you perspective and help you stay motivated, even during the tough times. Chapter 7. Content creation: document, don't create. Gary's advice for anyone trying to build a personal brand or business online can be summed up in one phrase: document, don't create. What does that mean? Instead of waiting until you've perfected a piece of content, just start sharing your journey in real time. People aren't looking for polished perfection, they want authenticity. They want to see the real you. Gary often references his early days of Wine Library TV as an example. He didn't have a fancy setup, and he wasn't a professional TV host. He was just a guy talking about wine in front of a camera. But it worked because he was being himself. He was documenting what he knew, sharing his insights, and being completely real with his audience. In today's world, this approach is even more powerful. With platforms like Instagram Stories, TikTok, and YouTube, you can literally document your day-to-day life and build a following around it. Whether you're starting a business, learning a new skill, or just navigating life, people will connect with your honesty and authenticity. Gary talks about how, early on, he used to overthink his content. He'd spend hours trying to come up with the perfect post or video. But then he realized that people were more interested in the process than the final product. They wanted to see the behind the scenes, the messy middle, the ups and downs of his journey. Once he started documenting instead of creating, his content became more relatable and engaging. Important tip: don't stress about making everything perfect. Document your journey, whether that's starting a business, learning a skill, or pursuing a passion. People want to see the real you, not a polished version of yourself. The more authentic you are, the more people will connect with your content. Chapter 8. Dealing with haters and critics. Here's something Gary Vee knows all too well. The more successful you become, the more haters you'll attract. It's a sad but inevitable reality of putting yourself out there. Whether you're building a business, creating content, or just sharing your thoughts online, there will always be people who try to tear you down. But Gary's approach to dealing with haters is simple: ignore them. Gary's been called every name in the book. He's had people criticize his work, mock his enthusiasm, and accuse him of being too intense. But instead of letting it get to him, he brushes it off. Why? Because he knows that haters are just noise. They're often projecting their own insecurities, and their opinions shouldn't matter to you. One of Gary's favorite stories involves a hater who kept tweeting at him, calling him out and mocking his work. Instead of firing back, Gary responded with kindness. He asked the guy why he felt that way and offered to help him out. The hater didn't know how to react. In fact, he ended up apologizing and admitting he was just frustrated with his own life. Gary's message is clear: don't let negative people derail you from your mission. Stay focused on what you're building, and don't waste energy on people who are trying to bring you down. Chapter 9. Focus on what you can control. One of Gary Vaynerchuk's most powerful lessons is that you can't control everything, but you can control your reaction to things. Life throws curveballs, whether it's a failed business venture, a tough market, or a sudden personal setback. But Gary's mindset is to focus only on the things that are within your control. This shift in focus helps you move forward instead of getting stuck in frustration or blame. Gary likes to say, "There's no point in crying over spilled milk." If something goes wrong, there's no use obsessing over it. Instead, look at what's next and how you can adapt. You may not be able to control how a market crashes, a client backs out, or a trend shifts, but you can always control your work ethic, how you react, and what you do moving forward. This is where Gary's obsession with emotional intelligence comes into play. In business and life, things rarely go exactly as planned. For example, Gary talks about the time in 2008 when the financial crisis hit, and many businesses were panicking. Instead of letting the chaos paralyze him, he doubled down on content creation and social media marketing, knowing that even in tough times, innovation and creativity could be controlled. He couldn't fix the economy, but he could hustle even harder in areas where he had influence. He shares a story about an early setback in his career. He had spent months working on a big marketing plan for his family's wine business, investing time and energy into a campaign that was supposed to drive massive sales. But when it launched, it flopped. Instead of throwing in the towel or blaming external factors, Gary immediately shifted his energy toward fixing the problem. He adjusted the strategy, found new opportunities, and turned the failure into a learning experience. That's the mindset of focusing on what's next, not what went wrong. Important tip: when something goes wrong, don't get stuck on the problem. Focus on what you can control: your work ethic, your attitude, and your next steps. Challenges are inevitable, but how you respond to them is what will determine your success. Chapter 10: Triple down on your passion. Gary Vee is a huge advocate for passion over profit. He believes that if you're truly passionate about something, the money will follow. Too many people chase trends or try to find the quickest way to make a buck, only to burn out because they're not actually interested in what they're doing. Gary's advice? Find what makes you excited to get up in the morning and go all in on that. This doesn't mean you need to quit your job tomorrow and start a business around your hobby. Instead, start with small steps. Begin creating content around your passion, whether it's writing blog posts, recording YouTube videos, or posting on Instagram. As Gary says, if you're doing something you love, it won't feel like work. He emphasizes that happiness and fulfillment should be the priority, not just chasing the next paycheck. Gary shares a story about a guy who loved garage sales. For years, he would spend his weekends hunting for treasures and flipping them for profit. But he never thought he could turn that passion into a full-time gig. After hearing Gary speak about turning passions into profit, this guy started documenting his garage sale trips on YouTube. Over time, his channel grew, and he now makes a full-time income doing what he loves, hunting for hidden gems and sharing his adventures online. That's the beauty of today's digital world. Whatever your passion is, there's an audience for it. Whether you're into vintage cars, video games, knitting, or cooking, there are people out there who share your interests. And if you start creating content around that passion, you'll begin to build a community that supports you. Gary loves to point out that you only need a small, loyal audience to succeed. You don't need millions of followers or customers. If you can build a strong connection with a dedicated group of people who love what you do, you can build a business around that passion. Important tip: stop worrying about what will make the most money and start focusing on what excites you. Find your passion and start creating around it. If you love what you do, the success will follow. Chapter 11: Stop complaining, nobody cares. Here's some tough love from Gary Vee: stop complaining because nobody cares. This is one of his most blunt pieces of advice, but it's one of the most important. Too many people waste time whining about how unfair life is, how the system is rigged, or how they didn't get the opportunities they deserved. But Gary's philosophy is simple: complaining changes nothing. If you're unhappy with your situation, the only way to fix it is to take action. Gary often shares how he worked long hours in his family's wine shop while his friends were out partying or having fun. He could have complained about missing out on fun, but instead, he focused on the long-term payoff. He knew that his hard work would eventually pay off, and it did. Complaining about his situation wouldn't have changed anything, only his effort could. One of Gary's core beliefs is that we all have the power to change our circumstances, no matter how unfair or challenging they may be. He's quick to acknowledge that some people start with more advantages than others. But instead of complaining about the hand you're dealt, you have to focus on making the most of it. That means taking ownership of your life and your choices. Gary is known for calling people out when they start making excuses. He believes that most excuses are just ways of avoiding responsibility. Whether it's blaming the economy, blaming your upbringing, or blaming your current situation, none of those excuses will move you forward. The only thing that will is hard work and perseverance. He tells a story about how, early in his career, he watched other businesses soar ahead of his family's wine shop. It would have been easy to get bitter or complain about how others had better resources or luck. But Gary refused to play the victim. Instead, he worked even harder to find creative ways to grow his business, eventually surpassing many of his competitors. Important tip: complaining gets you nowhere. Take ownership of your life and stop making excuses. Focus on what you can do to improve your situation, and don't waste energy on things outside of your control. Chapter 12: Context matters. Tailor your content to the platform. One of Gary's signature strategies for success in social media marketing is understanding that context matters. It's not enough to create one piece of content and blast it across every platform. Each platform has its own culture, language, and audience, and you need to tailor your message to fit the context. Gary often compares this to how you would behave in different social situations. You wouldn't act the same way at a formal business meeting as you would at a casual backyard barbecue. The same principle applies to content creation. What works on LinkedIn won't necessarily work on TikTok. What works on Twitter might fall flat on Instagram. For example, Gary points out that on Instagram, it's all about the visual. People scroll quickly, so your image or video needs to grab attention in the first few seconds. On Twitter, however, it's more about witty, concise messaging. Facebook is better for long-form content and discussion, while TikTok thrives on short, engaging videos that entertain or educate in a matter of seconds. Gary loves telling the story of how he first blew up on Twitter by using it in a way that no one else was at the time. While most businesses were using Twitter to broadcast generic marketing messages, Gary was engaging with individual users, answering their questions, and building relationships one tweet at a time. That's what the platform was built for, real-time interaction, and Gary understood the context better than most. He also stresses the importance of staying up to date with trends on each platform. Social media is always changing, and what worked last year might not work today. Gary is constantly experimenting with new types of content and keeping an eye on what's performing well. He doesn't get stuck in a routine. He adapts as the platforms evolve. Important tip: don't treat all platforms the same. Tailor your content to fit the context of each platform and stay flexible as trends change. Understand what kind of content works best on each platform and adapt your strategy accordingly. Chapter 13. Play the long game. Patience is everything. One of Gary V's biggest messages is that success takes time. In a world obsessed with instant gratification, Gary is here to remind you that real success requires patience and a long-term mindset. He constantly preaches the importance of thinking in decades, not days. Gary tells the story of how it took him years to build his family's wine business from a small local shop to a $60 million online powerhouse. It didn't happen overnight, and there were no shortcuts. He put in the work every day, consistently improving and adapting as the business grew. And even after reaching a high level of success, Gary never stopped thinking about the next 10, 20, or 30 years. Too many people give up when they don't see results right away. They expect to post a few videos, launch a business, or start a project and get immediate recognition or success. But that's not how it works. Gary is a firm believer that the people who win are the ones who keep showing up, day after day, for years, even when no one is watching. He often references how he spent over a year doing Wine Library TV, his daily video show about wine, before it started gaining any real traction. Most people would have given up after a few months of low views, but Gary kept going, knowing that consistency and patience are key to long-term success. One of his favorite quotes is "macro patience, micro speed." What this means is that while you should move fast in your daily actions micro speed, you should be patient when it comes to expecting results macro patience. Keep hustling and putting in the work every day, but don't expect massive rewards right away. Focus on the long-term vision and let time do its thing. Important tip: success doesn't happen overnight. Be patient, stay consistent, and play the long game. Keep showing up every day and eventually the results will come. Conclusion. Gary Vaynerchuk, also known as Gary V, is a successful entrepreneur, marketing expert, and motivational speaker known for his no-nonsense approach to business and life. His teachings focus on hustle, self-awareness, patience, and the power of social media. Here's a breakdown of some of his key lessons. Hustle and hard work. Gary constantly emphasizes the importance of outworking everyone. He believes that success doesn't come from luck or talent alone, but from consistently putting in the effort day after day. From his early days building his family's wine business to becoming a social media influencer, Gary's success was driven by relentless hustle. Self-awareness. One of Gary's core beliefs is that you need to know yourself. This means understanding your strengths and weaknesses and then doubling down on what you're good at. Whether you're a great communicator, a creative thinker, or a natural leader, you should focus on your strengths instead of trying to be someone you're not. This self-awareness also helps you avoid wasting time on things that don't align with your goals. Kindness and empathy. Gary is a strong advocate for kindness in business. He shares numerous stories about how responding to negativity with empathy instead of aggression has turned haters into supporters. He believes that empathy is a superpower, and being kind in your interactions will help you build better relationships in both business and life. Focus on what you can control. Gary stresses that you can't control every situation, but you can control your reaction. Rather than getting caught up in setbacks or failures, focus on what you can influence: your work ethic, your attitude, and your actions moving forward. Triple down on your passion. He believes that passion should drive your decisions, not profit. If you love what you do, the money will eventually follow. Gary encourages people to build businesses or side hustles around what excites them, no matter how niche it may seem. Passion fuels long-term success because it makes the journey enjoyable, even when things get tough. Stop complaining. Gary has little patience for excuses. He constantly reminds people that nobody cares about your complaints. If you want to improve your life, you need to take responsibility and take action. Complaining gets you nowhere. Hard work is the only way to change your circumstances. Adapt content to each platform. One of Gary's signature strategies is understanding that context matters when creating content for social media. He urges creators to tailor their content to each platform's specific culture and audience. Whether it's Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter, you need to deliver the right type of content that resonates with users on that platform. Play the long game. Patience is a major theme in Gary's teachings. He often says that success takes time, and most people give up too quickly when they don't see immediate results. He encourages you to think long-term, focusing on what you want to achieve in 10 or 20 years, not just tomorrow. Consistency and perseverance are essential to achieving lasting success. In summary, Gary V's teachings revolve around working hard, staying patient, being kind, and understanding yourself. Whether you're building a business, a personal brand, or just trying to improve your life, his advice is clear: hustle, self-awareness, and empathy are your keys to success. Thank you for completing another BrevRead video. Like and subscribe to see more of our videos. If you have a particular book that you would like us to summarize, please share it in the comments section.